So, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Nathan. I'm here today with Elke Scholz. Thanks for coming. Elke's a registered psychotherapist. I encourage you to come check out the resources that we've left for you. I'll leave a link below, but you can find them at anxietywarrior.ca/gifts, and check out her books there as well. Last week, we talked about being highly sensitive and some of the things that come with that character trait, as well as some strategies for dealing with it. And this week, we're going to look at some more strategies as well. So, Elke, I'll hand it over to you.
So Nathan, thank you. It's always a pleasure, and I enjoy having you here. And I think we have some participants as well. So just know that your confidentiality is protected. And if you like to have post questions, Nathan will moderate that, and we'll do our best. So we're always happy to answer any questions, because this is really for you. As Nathan was saying, last session we talked about highly sensitive character traits. And as a quick recap, highly sensitive people, we may be viewed, or maybe you've heard things of too sensitive, overreactive, overly sensitive, which all are sounding very negative, where highly sensitive is really a character trait. And it has pleasant side to it as well as unpleasant side. And some of the gifts of being highly sensitive is to be very intuitive. We tend to be in tune with nature, with each other, with our families, co-workers. We have a sense of an atmosphere of maybe a workplace, or even walking into the home. Highly sensitive people tend to be very conscientious and careful. The other part of that, and again, I'm only just touching on a few things, though, it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're highly sensitive. And that's not a flaw, it's just part of being highly sensitive, because we can so much more than other people and that aren't highly sensitive. So just knowing that, and there's ways of taking care of that. One of the strategies, which we've mentioned a few times, is our 0 to 10 scale. So what I'd like you to do is take a few moments right now, just a few seconds. 0 is no disturbance, feeling calm inside. 10 is, of course, way up, not being able to put thoughts together, whether that feels like short-circuiting or a blank mind or a scattered mind, is 10. So 0 to 10. Just check in right now. Where are you at? And give yourself that number. And I will do that too. And the number isn't a test. It's just really a scale of awareness for yourself. And as we move along, and as you keep practicing this, the awareness does help you. It gives you a perspective of where you're at, and especially where this is really useful. What I find, we kind of know what stresses us. We know what gets us way up here. However, do we always pay attention what lowers our stress level? And I think sometimes that can be very surprising. It could just be walking out in the sun and noticing that, oh, your whole body just settles and grounds, or maybe sitting beside some waterside or a waterfall. It could be as simple as a dog coming up to you and wagging its tail, is noticing how your body changes into the calmer place. And that's where I find it's really important, because as we learn that more and more and more, we're going to naturally then gravitate to those places. So I have two strategies right now. Actually have a whole bunch, so stay tuned for today. Today is really going to be a lot about strategies. So the one that we talked about, and I can't quite remember if it was last week, is the shield. And what I'd like you to do is think of a shield or a bubble, something that you can surround yourself with. And so whatever that is, and the idea is that it protects you and keeps energy out that you don't want to come in. And when we're highly sensitive, when we're taking things in, it really can discombobulate us and upset our system. So I just want you to take a few minutes, actually moments, not so much minutes. We're going to actually, a little bit later, have a very short presence imagery that we're going to do. But at this moment, if you can imagine what your shield is, what would be your shield? So just take a moment to imagine. So as you breathe, think about a shield. And again, the shield, it's all encompassing. It protects you. And again, there's no right or wrong, whatever comes to mind, because it will work for you. And it's also easier to remember if it's something that comes to mind, your own mind. And as you imagine this shield, imagine its qualities, what it looks like. And it is magical. And it also, it has a field of, if you can imagine that at arm's length, that shield protects that inner space for you. And that's really, really important when we're highly sensitive, because one of the things is, if we don't have that shield, and maybe some of you have experienced that, and we talked at length about it in the last session, is that we let in other energy. And it doesn't necessarily, I really, please notice I'm not using the word negative energy. It's just energy that upsets us. And it could just be kids playing and a lot of chaos. It could still upset us. And it's not that we're angry about it, but our system has trouble absorbing it all. And again, it could just be energy that, you just want to, you'll notice it. It's not that you'll become less sensitive, but we need to sometimes keep it here. As a therapist, I know I need to keep a shield up, because if I didn't, and I took all that in, I just couldn't do my job after 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. So I still am highly sensitive, and I want to be, of course, though we need to protect ourselves. And that's just with anything, and especially being highly sensitive. And so that inner part of you, we keep that as calm as possible. And that shield is a really useful exercise. I know it really works for me. I don't know if Nathan, do you want to say anything about the shield?
Well, I mean, I was giggling because today, and I feel like typically I think of cheesecloth. I don't know why that's my shield, but I do find it helpful and important, actually. It gives you a sense, and I mean, it's likely that it's real, of protection, right? A feeling of safety and boundaries that are helpful, because sometimes you take on stuff that's not positive for you to be taking in. So
yes, and you mentioned something really important as boundaries, and that's something we're going to focus on in subsequent sessions. This actually, the next model, we did talk about the shield, so I want to keep moving on, because we did have that meditation, and it was a little bit longer previously. However, it's something that's in the book as well, so you can look it up, and it's also known as a protector. Some people use the word hula hoop or space or arm's length. So I wanted to move on to this next model. And it's not my model. And I'm going to be moving the camera a little bit, so bear with me. And we're going to go over to the flip chart. So there we go. I think it looks a little blurry, but I think, can you see it okay, Nathan?
Yeah, it's readable. I think. Can you move the camera? Actually, yeah.
Oh, there it goes. It just changed. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I practiced a little bit earlier, so you won't see my face, but that's okay for this part. So this model comes from Byron Katie, and I've just modified it to Nature's Business. And there's more to it, of course, their business. And it'll make sense in a minute here. And then my business. And of course, you can check out Byron Katie's website, and she talks more about this. And actually in your kits, Anxiety Warrior 1, one of the authors, she talks about it at length and explains it. And then in Anxiety Warrior 2, I talk about it from my perspective, and I use it in my practice all the time. So Nathan, I'm going to ask you to help me. And maybe if anybody wants to type into the chat or anything, you're certainly welcome to as well, because I can read that. So Nature's Business. What would Nature's Business be? So if we're looking, yeah,
The
Nathan?
wind.
Sorry?
The wind.
Absolutely. So the wind. What else? So gravity. Go ahead. It's okay.
The sound of lightning.
The sound of?
Lightning.
Boy, you got that right, because my house was hit by lightning last week. So lightning, sure. So anything, this earth, we're going through the atmosphere at 60, whoops, I can't spell lightning, but anyways, there it is. We're spinning at over 60,000 miles an hour through the atmosphere. Nature's business. So we just don't have any control over that. And where this model has given me some emotional freedom, and it also creates some boundaries, is that there's nothing I can do about nature's business. And, you know, if I want to complain about the weather, I could, but there's no point, right? And so nature has its own business. So how puppies are born, how flowers grow, what happens with the weather, nature's business. So we're going to move down here. So what would be my business? What would be my business?
How I'm feeling today.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to write how I continue to feel.
Okay.
And what else? Maybe I can turn this a little bit better. No, that way there. That's better. What else? What else is my business?
My actions.
Absolutely. So my actions are my business. So how I choose to act, that's really my business. That's my choice. Also, how I choose to think. That is also something. So anything that's between my ears, that's a choice, and that's my business. So my imagination is another one. So, and I wrote how I continue to feel, because feelings, and that's something we can talk about again at another time. Feelings we all feel, and that's never to be defended or to be questioned. However, how we continue to feel, that's a choice. And somebody wrote hormones. Yeah, that could be, maybe that's about nature's business, right? That could be up here, nature's business. My history. So I'm guessing that would be your story. That could be, you're right. We have that. What we choose to do with it is our business. So we bring in our history and our stories for sure. And again, you know, it's how do we choose to think about that? How do we choose to imagine about that? What do we choose to act? How do we choose to take that history and move forward in our lives? That is our business. So here's the interesting part for this model. And please, if it doesn't make sense, again, certainly write questions into the chat and challenge us for sure. So having said that this is my business, what's their business? So that would be anybody that is not me. So that would be at the moment, Nathan, any participants, anybody that's looking, what is their business? What would be their business?
Well, would it maybe be fair to maybe put their actions and what they think and their imagination and how they continue to feel?
Absolutely. I'm nodding my head and you can't see me. So yes, absolutely. So all these things are their business. So I'm just going to make a wiggly line here. So this one here is fairly clear. Nature's business is pretty clear. But this one becomes a little wobbly only because what happens is when we're connected to other people, we tend to get into their business. And Nathan, you're totally right. All the things that are my business are other people's business. So of course I made such a wiggly line here. So what they think, their actions, reactions, how they choose to act, their imagination, that all belongs to them. There's nothing, and I don't spell very well, but anyways, it gets there. There's nothing that we can do to control someone else's thoughts between their ears. You know, we think maybe we can, however, really, it's really up to them to make choices, and they're going to think the way they're going to think. There's nothing you can do about it. If somebody is invested in a certain idea or they believe something and it really doesn't resonate with you, or it's not true for you, and they're convinced, there's nothing really you can do to change that. And I think we've all been in that kind of position. So the other thing that happens with this model, and where I find it works well with highly sensitive, is if we get into somebody else's business. So if we're into their business, we've just left our business. So we're getting out of our business, we're getting into theirs. We're not looking after ourselves anymore. We're not thinking, we're not considering what we're thinking about. We're not thinking about our actions or what we need to do, but we're involved in them and their business. And usually people don't enjoy that. And just as we don't enjoy if somebody comes in our business as well. So is there anything, Nathan, you want to add to this? You said you've studied Byron Katie quite a bit. And is there anything you want to add to the model?
I don't know if there's anything to add to this. It's powerful once you learn how to implement it, as well as the rest of the work. I would encourage anybody, this isn't planned, but to pick up Loving What Is if you get a chance. It's packed full of good tips to actually tackle really any problem that's coming in your way that you know you want to think about from many perspectives. So yeah, I encourage everybody to look her up.
Okay, so I'm going to spin around again so you can see me, and we'll leave the flip chart. And we're back here. There you go. And yeah, so what I find too with that, the model, it does create some boundaries, and it is a nice introduction to boundaries, and it's something that that we'll probably cover again. So one of the things I think about too is if somebody's created a situation and that's really their business. Somebody the other day was saying they felt bad for blocking somebody. However, this person was acting inappropriately. And I remember my friend saying, she goes, but I feel guilty. And I said, well, think about it. Who created the situation? And really, that's that person's business. They created the situation. And then she said, you know what? I don't feel so guilty anymore. So, you know, the model can be used in a lot of different ways. And it's something, too, that you can explore and does give you some emotional freedom.
Well, I mean, and one thing I would say is sometimes differentiating between those things can allow you to free yourself. Like some things that I've taken offense to are attributed to things that have nothing to do with me, and understanding that consciously allows me maybe to release some of those things. I guess in a context I thought I was really interesting. If you're driving down the highway and somebody, you know, cuts you off and you have to swerve, you're like, oh, that guy, and it makes you upset. And really, that has nothing to do with you. But if, let's say, if it was the wind that blew you and caused you to come out of the same swerve, you wouldn't be like, and so, you know, that kind of thought process and putting things into those different columns sometimes can help you, right? So.
Absolutely, and that's a great example. And I find it too when, you know, when people are making choices, and people can be your children, and that's why that line is wiggly, because, you know, when do we let our children, they're making choices, you know, if they're 8 years old, 12 years old, 16 years old, 18 years old, and looking at that and going, how much of this is my business? You know, I have adult children, and I have to step back and sit and think, okay, how much of this is my business? Usually the answer is, it's not my business. And, you know, we have a pretty great relationship. And if they want my input, of course, I'm there. I'm going to be there. However, if they haven't asked for it and it is their business, they're making their choices, well, then that's how it's going to roll out. And yeah, so it's a good model for that. And of course, if anybody's in danger, sometimes we need to get into their business. Though here's the other thing, and I do want to mention this before I leave that model, is knowing you have a choice. You may still want to get into their business. You know, maybe your neighbor spent all their money, and at the end of the month, they didn't have any money, and you chose to cook meals for them and make sure they weren't hungry. You chose to drive them to the food bank. You know that they made poor choices over the month. However, you can still sit back and go, okay, they did make poor choices. That's not so cool. However, you still can change or not change, but certainly make a choice to help them. So it's not about being so rigid of, okay, you know, they made poor choices, I'm going to let them go hungry. However, really just understanding that you have a choice, they've made poor choices, and how do you kind of surf through that? And that's why that line can be kind of wiggly, because we are caring people, and just know that you don't have to. And maybe you don't make a week's worth of meals, but maybe you just bring over 2 meals, and they've got to live with that. I don't know, but that's just an example. And that can also go with corporations too. I mean, they make decisions and management decisions all the time. That doesn't mean you need to overwork or perhaps, work extra time and not get paid, but it's a great model, I think. Okay. I hope I'm not rushing through it. I know Byron Katie has lots more to say about it, and there's more in the book, so you'll get some nice perspective from that. And I know Byron Katie actually, I don't mean to promote her so much, but she does have a website and lots of great resources on that as well. So if
and
you need
actually
more
on
information.
that point, her YouTube channel is pretty all-inclusive as well. And often, if there's an issue that you're thinking through, she holds a lot of conferences, and the question and answers are on there. So sometimes having that ability to listen to somebody work through a problem that may be similar or related to one that you have is helpful. So definitely check out her YouTube channel for some of those resources as well.
Right. So pretty great. So today we're going to, in the last 25 minutes that we have here, we're going to give you some more strategies. And one of the, we have gone through a few strategies about staying present, and I just wanted to give an example. And I thought if you want to, with this example, if you want to close your eyes, we're going to play some music just for a couple minutes. We have some music, and I'll let Nathan get that ready. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, if you want to close your eyes in this exercise of presence, and I'm going to use the example of a cup of tea. And imagine putting in the water in your kettle, and just imagine letting it boil. Hearing the sounds of the boil, and water does change as it boils. It's very interesting to me. I do it every morning because I make green tea, and green tea, of course, you don't want to boil water. So you've got to get it to that point just before it boils. So I listen to the water. So imagine listening to the water. And if you need it to boil, that's fine. Once the water is ready, take a moment and pour the water into your teacup. Take a moment to smell the tea as the hot water and the tea start to mix. Feel the warmth from the cup and the hot water. Hold the warm cup in your hands. Notice the warmth in your fingers and your palms. Notice the smell. Notice how the warmth goes up to your nostrils. And imagine the warmth of the drink going from your mouth to your throat and to your belly. Actually, just a note too, is the warmth of the liquid does calm your nervous system. So you can breathe into the calm and the warmth. So I use the example of a cup of tea, However, you can do this with so many different things. And the whole exercise is about being present. When we are totally present, things are perfect. They're fine. They're great. We're alive. We're noticing. We're here. We're present. And we're not worrying about the past. We're not worrying about the future. We're right here. And what I notice with anxiety or being highly sensitive is sometimes we get where it's too many things, and a sense of presence can soften that and relieve that. And the most lovely things is making a cup of tea or even hot water, however you want to do that. If it's coffee is your thing, that's okay too. It works. It's about slowing this process down and being totally present. It's interesting that many of us multitask and we think that's okay. And we don't need to multitask. We need to slow things down and one thing at a time. And it could be even petting the dog, or maybe it's telling a story to your child, is being present. Not so much that, oh, I've got to get them to bed so I can do laundry, and then I've got to cook, and then I've got to make the lunches, and then I gotta while I'm trying to sit here and I'm impatient because the child isn't going to sleep. Is being present for that moment. So how can you do that? And in the end, actually, it makes time slower and richer. So we have a few minutes left. Okay. Is that better? Did you not hear me before?
Oh, it's all fine. I didn't want you to be expecting to be able to hear me if I was talking to you.
Great. Okay, thank you. I like the sign. Keep the signs. That's great. It's perfect. So just right now, 0 to 10, after we just did this exercise of presence, where are you at? And just give yourself a number. And there may or may not have been a change. It's okay. Again, it's just about noticing. So I'd like to give another strategy, and it's called the container. And this is also really good for anxiety and highly sensitive, and it'll come up in different workshops. I'd like you to imagine a container, and it can be any container. It really doesn't matter. And you can have many containers. And this is interesting because the idea of the container is that we can put something in a container, we can lock it up, and we can put it on a shelf somewhere. It doesn't mean we're pushing it away. It also doesn't mean that we're burying it or stuffing it. The difference is that we're very aware of what we're putting in the container. That's the difference. It's a subtle difference, yet a very important difference. Okay? So, and maybe what I like to do just before you do imagine your container, this container can hold something, perhaps it's grief. And it may be a grief of loss of a job, maybe it's a grief of loss of a pet, maybe it's grief of loss of a loved one. And the reason that I'm giving you a subject is sometimes that will influence the type of container that you choose. So again, imagine a container, and it can be any container that you like. So just take a few moments. And if you want to, remember we did our tapping. I'm just going to do the butterfly tap so that you can see me. And it's bilateral tapping. And imagine your container. And imagine that you're putting the energy, and since we did grief, we're talking about grief, maybe the grief can go in there, perhaps the sad memories can go in there. And again, just take your time. Perhaps it was a situation that you really don't want to recall. You can put it in there. And I know we're here in a session and we may not take all the time that you particularly need. It's something that you can do after the session is just take a moment and take as long as you need to put whatever you need to in the container. And this container will have a lid and some way of locking it. It may be with rope or ribbon. Perhaps it actually has a padlock, perhaps a combination lock, whatever works for your container. And once you've done that, you can put your container somewhere. It could go on a shelf or in a room somewhere, and that's okay. It could go in the ocean. It could go in the back shed. It doesn't matter. You know where it is, and you'll remember where it is. And on the occasion, I'm going to stop tapping. On the occasion, some of these memories or feelings or whatever you've put in the container, they leak out. So maybe after this session, you're going to make supper, or perhaps maybe you got to drive somewhere and it'll leak out whatever that was that you locked away. It's a little sneaky that way, especially at the beginning. And all you do is tap again and put it back. And again, you take as long as you like. And, you know, if it doesn't work, try it again, okay? And don't give up. Give it a few minutes. And you haven't done anything wrong. It will work. And sometimes we need to build a room around the container. Yes, somebody just wrote in and said, but a whole wall of my storage bins just toppled over. Yeah, that sometimes happens. So you may have a whole bunch of bins that you put away. And so perhaps after the session, you know, if it's too difficult to pick up each bin, sometimes we need to build a bigger wall or a room around the spilled containers. And that does happen. So we've done that before. And we'll build a wall or a room. And the room will hold all the mess. And the idea again is that it doesn't get to take over. It gets to live in that storage area. Okay? And don't give up. It may take a while. You may have to take a break from it. And then again, just tap. And like I said, if it's too difficult to pick up each bin, my inclination is just to build a wall around it. Just make a big wall and then put a lock again on that wall. And sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to put guards on the wall as well, and caretakers. It's okay. We can do that, and eventually those things will stay away till we're ready to work on them. And I don't know, Nathan, is there anything you'd like to add? I'm pretty sure you've used this strategy.
No, this first time I've unpacked it actually.
Okay.
Put it into use, I should say. Yeah, yeah. So I'm digesting at the moment myself.
Okay, great. Thank you for the feedback. And I think, I think some of us, I think actually, no, I think we do have versions of the container. And what the purpose of bringing it forward into our session is to give it awareness, to give it a name. And that is the difference. If we're just burying, stuffing, pushing things away, ignoring, that isn't useful, because what happens, it kind of brews, and it's like this beach ball under the water. And if something upsets us, it may be something very simple like losing keys or misplacing keys. We usually find our keys, and boom, off goes the that suppression that we've tried to push into the basement. Where the container, it's very conscious, very conscientious that we've taken this and we've put it away. And it's like, you noticed, one of the participants wrote in and noticed that a whole wall of the storage bins just toppled over. That's very conscious, very aware. Though the good news for that is we can build a wall, we can build a dam, and because we're conscious of it, we know that it's there. So this isn't something that we're pushing away to ignore. And one day when we're ready, we'll work on some of those things in our time. So that's what's really, really important. So one of the things, I didn't want to rush along to, I had some other strategies, but we'll do that for next time. And if there's any other questions, I know it's probably a few minutes short, though, like I said, I don't really want to rush into another strategy. We're going to have another couple weeks. We'll have another session. And again, it will still be on strategies. One of the things that I do want to talk about in future sessions is about boundaries, creating boundaries, because that's a great way to manage our anxiety. Because one of the things that happens is when we go past our boundaries, that's when we get tired, we get exhausted, anxious, very stressed. And some of the things we talked about before, is it anxiety or is it stress? It doesn't really matter if it's giving us headaches, stomach aches, keeping us awake, or making us sleepy or hungry or not hungry. Those are all things that are affecting us. And a lot of times it's because we're going past our boundaries in some way or another, whether it's we're not looking after ourselves. And just as a little teaser is, we're the only ones that can create our own boundaries and set our own boundaries, and no one else. It's up to us to do that. And that's why I really like that Byron Katie model, nature's business, their business, my business. That helps me set boundaries. What is my business? My business is looking after myself. And my business is my actions and reactions. My business is how I think and what's between my ears. And nobody can take that away from you. And Nelson Mandela is a great example of that. He was, I believe, jailed for 20 years, and no one could take his mind from him. And people, for history upon history throughout time, it's one thing no one can take away from you is what is between your ears, is how you think. And Viktor Frankl wrote a book too on a man's purpose. And again, it's about what's between your ears. What's your perspective? It's the same world. And I think too with Byron Katie, is what belongs to us? What do we have control over? Well, we got control over this. this I call it airspace. I don't mean to be insulting, but that's what I call it, is my real estate, what's between my ears. That's what we have control over. And boundaries, it's up to us again. So that's a little teaser for next time. And thank you so much for joining us. It's such a great pleasure. And bless you all and take care.